Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this. My name is Winston, the content marketing guy. And today I have a very special guest with me, Jamila, straight out of Trinidad, fellow Caribbean marketer. But I'm very excited to have you on, Jamila.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Winston. I appreciate you inviting me on. And well, yes, I do consider myself a marketer in some regard. Branding is just another way to reach your audience, which if you look at the umbrella of marketing or activities under that umbrella include that. So yeah, it's okay. I'm a marketer.
Right, great. So just to give you a bit of backstory about Jamila, guys. So Jamila is actually a personal branding strategist and coach. So she, works with individuals to help them build their own personal brand to make use of opportunities. She has her own branding consultancy, Jamila Bannister Branding Limited, and she has worked in marketing roles as director of business operation as well as corporate communications. Now, the story of how Jamila and I actually got connected is it's very, I wouldn't say strange, but let's just say it left a lasting impression on me because we connected over LinkedIn, as literally everyone who's a guest on this podcast and I do. And she sent me a video message, just thanking for connecting. It wasn't a pitch. It wasn't her trying to sell me something. Just her sending me a message with her beautiful smile saying, thanks for being connected and so on. And that really stood out to me. And, from then we've kind of been, I guess you can say LinkedIn online buddies, if you want to call it that.
So to speak, in a manner of speaking, yeah.
Yeah. So Jamila, let's just before we even get to it, I'd love for you to share your story with the audience, where you started out from career-wise to actually being one of the top-known branding strategists on LinkedIn. Yes, I will say top-known.
Well, my career started off in communications, which kind of laid the foundation for where I am now. So corporate communications, and then moving from working for government agencies. I worked with the police for about 3 years. Then I moved into private sector, worked in insurance for another 2 or 3 years. And then after all of that, I left my corporate job because in the back of my head, I wanted to be able to do more, learn more. But every experience really kind of brings certain things to the fore to you, because in my mind, in order for me to learn more about strategy and business, I needed to go back to school. Which couldn't be further from the truth, So I actually left my corporate job, took up a scholarship opportunity, went abroad, studied, and then came back to Trinidad, only to realize that I was somehow just penetrating the job market was really difficult during that time. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we were going through a bit of a recession, so to speak. I wouldn't officially call it that, but the economy definitely was under some pressure. We've only now started to really recover. But during that time, as somebody who just came back from the UK, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I have all these paper assets, all these degrees, I could definitely get an opportunity regardless of what is going on in the environment. So I came there with this kind of notion that, I'm definitely going to stand out. Of course, there are lots of people who had that notion. So what I realized is that in order for me to be able to make a difference, in order for me to be able to be seen as different, what I needed to start to do is work on standing out through my personal brand. So I really started to talk about that. And I really started to talk about PR and comms, because that is where I had come from. So putting myself out there wasn't a big deal for me. I had become accustomed to it, is what I had done all the time. What I was missing, however, is that I didn't realize how much the corporate environment had me in a bit of a silo, because as much as I talked strategy, and as much as I could have seen it in the context of where I worked previously, I couldn't make the connection between that and myself and me getting another opportunity. So I spent quite a lot of time, as I'd say, proverbially bouncing my head, trying to figure things out, trying to do different things, because in the midst of still holding out hope that I would actually get a corporate job. On the other side, I was telling myself, well, if I don't get this, maybe I should start working on my own thing. So it was kind of juggling those two things and hoping that I would have a breakthrough somewhere. And as I did more and more, my whole journey started to really affect the things I would put out. So when I would get upset that people wouldn't give me an opportunity, I would write about things like, what corporate entities are getting wrong, or what they should be doing instead, and those kinds of things. But when you write about corporate like that, they're not gonna hire you because you're saying things about that. And but I didn't even think about that. I was just basically expressing myself, and then there was sometimes, like, you would get kind of overwhelmed because everybody knows that hunting for a job could really be emotionally overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would just like stop writing, and then some people would meet me in places and be like, well, where's the stuff? We'd be looking out for it. We do enjoy it, and it was good advice you would give. And I told myself, I said, okay, well, clearly I need to keep doing this thing in the midst of trying to balance looking for an opportunity, etc., etc. Anyway, fast forward to about 2018, some 2016, 2018, when things kind of fell apart, like in a big way. And when I look back now, and I'm grateful for that year, because that year actually forced me to spend a lot of time reading, retooling, learning a lot of things digital, learning a lot. Because when I was in my last job, when I was manager of corporate communication, yes, I felt like I knew digital, but I didn't really know it, because all I had to do was manage the process, ensure that the agency delivered, ensure that we had the numbers. I had my numbers for my report that I had to write. I never had to get down into nitty-gritty, but because I didn't have a choice really, 2018 allowed me to get down deep into the finer things of digital, understanding how things work, understand how content works, understanding how a digital ecosystem is built, from lead magnet to website to email to nurture to conversion, and understand those things. And for me, I know my strength lied in the first part, putting yourself out there and getting people's attention. And I recognized that I had to spend a lot of time figuring out the other parts. How do I turn that attention into actual opportunity? How do I actually sell something? And it took me a long time to understand that. So now that I'm in a place where I get it, and I could actually put something out on Facebook and my inbox is lighting up, that is a huge jump from where I was before. And that's why I now focus my personal branding efforts on people who are transitioning from the corporate world into their own online business, because I know there are lots of gaps that are there in terms of understanding just how many changes you have to make from your mindset, and how many changes you have to understand in the process of how things operate. Because when you suddenly move from being responsible for a few things, and then you're suddenly elevated to the level of CEO, it becomes difficult to kind of see things from a bird's eye view all at once. There are things you will miss. There are things that you wouldn't understand. And putting yourself out there and claiming that level of authority that you have never claimed before could be a bit of a nerve-wracking thing for a lot of people. So they're like, who would believe me? Like, why would people buy from me? Like, when I say that, I feel like an imposter. And all the things that, people have to compete with in their own mind. And they are their biggest, I wouldn't say enemy, but they are their biggest opponent in terms of them putting themselves forward and really saying, well, I am the expert at X or Y or Z. And they would have been doing it in their corporate job. But for them to stand on their own and say that about themselves is where the biggest adjustment normally has to take place. Once that adjustment takes place, then it becomes easier for us to put in the technical pieces, put in the content, put in the digital, put in the lead magnet, all those things after. So that's my story. I know what it's like to be completely confused about how does this thing work, and then understand how it eventually unfolds and how it does in fact work.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned a few things. One of them being that you were kind of job hunting back then. Opportunities weren't really coming in as you had expected them to, and it kind of forced you into the position that you are right now, in terms of owning your own business, providing this service to other people. And it was kind of the same thing for me. not necessarily from the job hunting standpoint necessarily, but more from I worked 2 jobs where I was trying to introduce this whole concept of content marketing. And, one of those jobs I'd actually started actually produced results far greater than the company I'd ever seen, like in the space of, I think it was less than 2 months, probably like a month and a half. And even with that, the CEOs still found it difficult to actually move ahead with doing content marketing. So when I left that job, it was really out of necessity. The reason why I started the content marketing guy, because I realized, okay, probably it's a case where they don't necessarily understand the value of content marketing. So probably I need to be that resource to educate not just them, but businesses and business owners, CEOs, whoever on a whole, on the value of content marketing. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you mentioned is the fact that, well, I guess kind of going back to the same first point of you being forced into that position. And I guess this kind of segues into a question where, with what's going on right now with COVID, and a lot of people either barely holding on to their jobs, or a lot of people who have lost their jobs, they are now forced in this position where it's not a case where 1 or 2 persons lost a job. It's the entire global environment of not as many opportunities. I won't say no opportunities, but not as many. So let's say for someone who wants to make that transition now from corporate to doing their own thing, what advice would you give them to build that personal brand from scratch? Like what are some of the first, I would say 2 or 3 things they can do today to actually start that process?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, for somebody who's looking to transition out, I would definitely tell them to start with themselves on exactly where do they see themselves. If they were to be outside of their job, where exactly are they picturing themselves being, and what exactly do they picture themselves doing? Because for some people who may be, let's say, on their way out of a job, perhaps it's a blessing for them because they didn't like the job anyway. And they wanted a reason to leave. And now that they have the opportunity to leave, they see it as their opportunity to do what they actually wanted to do. If that's not the case, I think one of the most important things is to understand, how could I provide value outside of the context of a corporate environment? And I think that's a question everybody needs to ask themselves, because we have been so trained and indoctrinated to only find value inside of a corporate environment. From the moment we have to step out and to say, well, I could do this or I could do that, it's difficult for us to articulate that. I mean, my job was corporate communications manager. When I take over the corporate and I put communications manager, what context do I have to operate in? So for me, I had to spend a lot of time figuring out what was my context. Who are the people I'm trying to serve, and how exactly am I bringing value to the table? So I think the first thing you need to figure out is, how can I bring value to the table? I think the second thing is to understand that the corporate environment teaches you to be a generalist. That is what it does. What you have to do is you have to unlearn that. You have to unlearn the fact that you are in fact a generalist, and you probably carry that generalist title with some level of pride as well, because it's great to be known as the person on the job who everybody says, yeah, well, talk to this person. They definitely will have a solution. And any problem people have, they come to you and you're like, yeah, this is my title. I wear this title as problem solver, right? But what you want to do is you want to be the problem solver for a single problem. Try not to be the problem solver for every problem, as a corporate environment generally teaches you to be, right? Particularly if you work in a small company and you have to do a lot of different things. So the important thing is for you to find value outside of the corporate environment. Know what your inherent value is. Don't rely on the corporate environment to give you that. Know where you want to see yourself. So how exactly are you planning to serve? What do you want people to know? What do you want people to walk away from you knowing or feeling or understanding by the time they have done? And understand that you have been trained to be a generalist. It's not your fault. It's just the way the education system has been built. And now we have to retrain our minds to be specialists, to be experts. So you do, whether you provide a service to help people to get over their mindset issues or content issues or branding issues. Be very specific about who you serve, and how you can actually help those people. Do not be afraid to be an expert. Being a generalist is cool, but being an expert is great. That's what I would say. Yeah.
You know, when you said in the corporate setting, people have been taught to be a generalist, and now they come out and they need to learn how to be a problem solver for one specific problem. I don't know why, but that single line just got me so excited because, and it's funny because, I mean, even though you may say it, it sounds easier said than done, to be honest, because even I who know these things, even with the content marketing guy, because there are so many different needs or pain points or challenges that I know content marketing can solve for so many different people, so many different industries.
Yeah,
it's so difficult for me to really, like, to this day. I think I've been doing it for almost about a year and a half now, and still to this day, I think probably last month I really figured out where I wanted to zone in and say, all right, this one specific problem. Yes, I know we can use content for branding and for this and for that, but this one specific need that I realize not many marketers or content marketers really focus on, this is where I really want to put or plant my flag, so to speak, and to be known for this one thing within the realm of content marketing. So the whole idea of being a generalist in the corporate environment, is it a case where, or should I say, if someone wants to build a personal brand, do you find that it's difficult or different from building a personal brand in the Caribbean versus outside of the Caribbean? Like, are there certain differences in the nuances of the Caribbean versus other territories, or do you find it to be the same?
Well, from what I can tell, it's not very different. I just say that, well, let me speak for Trinidad in particular. I just say that sometimes it becomes more difficult from here because we have a lot of family-owned businesses here, right? And as a result of that, you'd find that sometimes the way that they would structure their companies, you know, instead of them relying on, let's say, an expert in this field or in that field or the other field, they have the family at the head of the table, which is fine, it's their company. But many of the family members aren't really qualified to run any company anyway. They are there by default. Therefore, when it comes to them developing an organizational chart or developing something like that, you know, they may assign a lot of duties and responsibilities to somebody who may not necessarily be specialized in that field. And you find that a lot. As a result of that, by default, we end up doing a lot more than we actually should. And so we find it difficult to actually find our own brand inside of there unless we make a concerted effort to actually design that on our own. In other organizations, countries where there may be bigger companies, where they put a special emphasis on expert work, just because the size, probably sheer size of the company or the amount of things that they have to do, maybe the budgets they work with, maybe there's more room for people to actually have an expertise inside of a company. But a lot of times when we have smaller companies, unless you are somebody who has established yourself for a number of years in a highly technical field that isn't really, that takes a lot of time, maybe something to do with finance or maybe something to do with law. But from the time there are certain career paths that people think that anybody could do it. Marketing is one of those things, right? Anybody say, oh, I could do that. Marketing is advertising. I work in a company.
And start a page and get likes and engagement.
Exactly. That's what they think. You know, everybody thinks that they can do marketing. Everybody has an opinion. Well, yeah, we could just run an ad because they know that is what marketing is, right? And meanwhile, the field of marketing has so many subsets of expertise that a lot of people don't really understand unless you're in an environment to appreciate when you run an ad campaign and you could actually tie it back to $1 million in sales. I don't know of any company that I've ever worked with locally that could say, well, as a result of this campaign, we made this amount of money, right? And there's a forensic nature that a lot of developed countries have that I think we lack in a big way. And probably that is throughout the Caribbean. We can't really say for sure what the result of this particular marketing activity, what is the numbers on the other side to match back with that. And because with personal branding, you have to be very clear about the result, that the impact that you're having on your audience, because that's the only way you would know whether or not you're actually making a difference, right? So I could say, well, perhaps I did this live broadcast, and as a result of that, 3 people signed up to my mailing list, and one of those persons converted to my program. I could clearly make a connection between what I'm doing versus what I'm not doing. It's not like days of old where you may hand out some flyers or you may get a coverage in the newspaper. Now, having a personal brand requires you to be very measured and understand the impact of what you're doing. And a lot of it, I could tell you for sure. In my own experience, I can't tell you what my marketing activity, what the result of that is. And that is also one of the reasons why it's so difficult for corporate people to tie what they're doing to an actual result. Therefore, when it comes to actually turning that into a business, it's a gap in them understanding that, yeah, well, when you do this, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to experience this, or when you put this out there, or send this email, or when you pay and you subscribe to this thing, you're supposed to get this result. So I would say probably the biggest difference, our lack of appreciation for data, our lack of appreciation for numbers, and how important and critical that is actually to understanding how business functions. So when it comes to monetizing your personal brand, we have a harder time doing that. Unless you're probably in sales and you're driven by numbers.
Right.
But for the average person who's not, yeah, I think that's the most difficult part.
You know, and let me just quickly say that, no, it's not just Trinidad. We have the same problem here in Jamaica, where marketers don't know how to tie the activity or at least show the actual marketing activity and tie it to business results. And they almost never use data at all unless that's to do with reach and impressions and engagement, which sounds good on paper, but in terms of bottom line, it doesn't really make sense.
Yes.
And what I find with marketers that don't necessarily do that within the corporate setting is that, they'll often complain that the organization doesn't see the value of marketing, and, we're having trouble convincing management to increase our marketing budgets. And the argument I keep having is, well, can you really blame them? Because if you're going to put on a trade show or sponsor an event and you have your feather banners all over the place, and probably you're spending hundreds of thousands or probably even millions of dollars, but yet you aren't able to quantify those results, I mean, why should they necessarily give you more money? And you're like, yeah, but we're getting brand awareness and visibility. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you now tie visibility of this specific activity or set of activities to an actual bottom line? So, I mean, I just want to underscore that particular point, because it's something, it keeps coming up in conversations I have with marketers in the Caribbean, and I keep wondering, well, where's the disconnect? Why is it so? Is it a case where we just can't be bothered and it's easier for us to pitch the idea of very vague abstract results that we can't necessarily track? Or is it a case where we don't know how? Or is it just us being lazy, to be quite frank? I mean, I don't really understand where the disconnect lies.
Well, I think the disconnect honestly lies in the people who are signing checks. So in my experience, the people who are signing the checks are the owners of the company, the CFOs, are not millennials. They are not the ones who can really understand. They need to see things physically. They need to see banners. They need to see things in front of their face. So if they are not on their phone looking at social media, as far as they're concerned, no marketing is happening, right? If they don't hear an ad on the radio, no marketing is happening. If they, like, I worked at a company, oh my God, I laugh now when I think about them. The owner insists that they wanted static billboards, placed around the country. And when we tried to remove it from the marketing plan, oh my God, it was such a drama. We can't tie any ROI to a static billboard. We don't know, right? But we can tie it back to an ad. We can tie it back to a campaign online. And for them, I believe the issue is that when we tell you we need X amount of dollars to invest in an online campaign, and they can't see the campaign plastered when they're driving on the highway, they can't see it on a big billboard, or they can't see it out in the paper because, of course, they're still reading their paper every day. As far as they're concerned, they are getting no visibility. That is a problem. So to get people at that level to sign off on big budgets for digital campaigns where we may invest in a really tight ecosystem with email marketing stuff and nurture sequences and digital tools, freebies, downloads, and or sending people on a virtual treasure hunt. Things like that is very hard for them to conceptualize. So I feel like that may be the disconnect, that you have people speaking one language who are working in the engine room, and then you have people speaking another language who is actually responsible for financing these types of projects and these campaigns.
All right, Jamila. So I have a quick question. There is actually a conversation I was just a part of on LinkedIn, like shortly after we started this podcast. And I gave my answer, but I love your take on it. So what she's concerned with is she actually works in an organization as a marketer, but she has her business on the side. And her concern is how to position herself as someone who is competent and loyal to her audience in both industries. So I think what she's doing is she has her name as the name, but has multiple, I guess you can call it, has her hand in multiple pots then, so to speak. So there isn't necessarily a distinct brand for each business or what she does. What would be your advice in terms of how can she distinguish both in terms of her I see the look on your face. Okay. How can she distinguish herself as being competent and loyal as a marketer, as opposed, and also, with whatever other business that she has?
Well, in situations like that, I liken that to trying to serve two masters at a time, to be honest. Because unless what you are doing at work aligns with what you are doing on your side, on your own, in some way, it means that essentially you're trying to build two personalities at once, right? And that is classified as an illness. It's ill-advised, at least for me. I think, and I'll tell you what it is. I'll give you an example. When I left because I had a 6-month stint at a company that was very, very aggressive. But when I left there, I made the decision that I would no longer try to split my energies between trying to look for a job and do my own thing. I had to sink all of my energy into this one thing. And doing that produced a lot of things. It produced a book, it produced a podcast, it produced a summit, it produced quite a number of things. Because I was not distracted with looking for other things. And it's quite difficult for you to try to stand up to be the brand representative for a company that is, well, I'm assuming the company is not hers. And also try to build your own brand at the same time. Now, it's one thing if the companies are both yours and they're under some sort of conglomerate type of name, right? And one is an extension of the other, or one perhaps is another division of the other, or you can see how both of them relate. But if these two businesses are disconnected from each other, you are now trying to serve two masters at a time. And usually in a case like that, I would tell people, well, you have to there comes a point where you will have to make a choice. Because in order for either one to really grow and to get the attention it needs, it means that you're going to have to really sink a lot of energy and effort into ensuring that it grows in a particular way. You can't give 250% of the effort and expect it to have 100% growth. That's not the way it works, right? So I'd say unless one could feed the other, and I always tell people to focus on one thing, and that's always the advice I get from the digital marketing gurus. Do one thing, do the most with that one thing, exhaust that one thing, and once you've done that, what you do is that you train yourself on the process, the simple, repeatable process you need to do in order to make your sales, in order to bring clients in order to build your network. You understand what it takes. You understand what that requires. So it's very easy for you to know to take that model and probably tweak it and apply it to something else. So you're not like in a stage where you're still trying to understand how one works while trying to build another one. You know, it's a little bit counterintuitive from a growth point of view. And it also is very exhausting to try to keep up with both of them at the same time. So I honestly do liken that to trying to serve two masters at a time. And you know what they say about that? You love one and you hate the other. So at the end of the day, I think you do have to make a choice. If one is just like a small thing that could be pause it and focus on one, build that out, and then get back to the other one. You don't have to abandon it totally, but in order for anything to grow, you need to give it 100% of your attention. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the answer I gave wasn't necessarily that. What I recommended to her was to create two separate brands for each, because I think what she was trying to do is have her as an individual, as I mentioned, but she does two things. And I said, well, if it is that you're trying to build a brand, you have to build a brand for each. You can't have you as the individual brand. You can be the face of both brands, but you have to build, because it's two separate audiences with two separate needs. So you as the marketer, you'll need a brand for that persona then, so to speak. And then you have your other business and you need a brand, but both can be connected to you. So that's the response I gave to her. But going back to what going back to what you said, it is true, because even though I gave her that advice, I understand completely what you're saying, because prior to the content marketing guy, I was trying to build a brand in something else, relating to personal development. And I was trying to juggle both. When I just started the content marketing guy, I was trying to juggle both, and it just wasn't working out. Well, I'm not saying it wasn't working out. It was working out, but it took a lot out of me as the individual, because it's not like I have a team of people that I can use to create content or manage the social media. So I had to drop one of them to really focus on the content marketing guy and building that out. And I said, well, once I can actually get a team in to build out the content marketing guy, then I can go back to that now and then focus my energies there.
Yeah. Because that's good advice you gave her, to develop two separate brands, and because they are two separate audiences, but you're going to need somebody to run those brands all the time in order for them to be consistent, in order for them to generate the income you want. And nobody can understand your brand like you. That's just, nobody will be able to feel as passionate, feel as driven about, unless they're probably some sort of investor. But at the same time, you are the one who came up with the vision. You are the one who came up with the whole idea for this thing. And your brand needs that level of drive, and it's almost like maniacal. Then you need that level of drive in the beginning for it to really take off, and for that rocket ship to take off. When it gets into space, it can kind of float on its own, but your brand needs that from the beginning, and it's difficult to give that if your attentions are split between two different things.
I agree. Yeah. So going into something now, and I want to quote you on this, where it says, or should I say you said, that I help experts and professionals become more confident and create strong personal brands so that they can become influential and convert this influence into paid opportunities. Yeah. A brand positioning statement that I love, by the way, because it's so simple, clear. I mean, anybody reading it can immediately get to know what it is that you do and what you offer. But do you actually have a process for building a personal brand when working with clients? Like, is there like a step-by-step, like, all right, do this first, then this, and so on?
Yes, I actually do. So we always start with self. We always start with you as an individual, which is the confidence building piece. So the confidence is the foundation piece. And it starts as simple as you setting some goals and basically getting your life together. It starts with you building discipline into everything that you do, from scheduling your day, from planning the things that you have to do, from the people that you spend time with, for the media that you consume. If you find yourself spending a lot of time on the shade room and other gossip sites, changing all of those things and spending more time focusing on things that can actually build you, because there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on gossip sites that actually add absolutely nothing to them, right? Changing things, like I actually outlined like 7 pillars in my book, The Brand Print, you know, and something as simple as getting a mentor. I got a mentor that made a huge difference for me, and having somebody who would have gone there before. So I really do start with the foundation piece, which is self, and try to kind of deal with some of the limiting beliefs. And some of the limiting beliefs people have, I know because I had things like, but I didn't know how to sell anything because I never sold anything before. Okay, you sat your whole life behind a desk in a company. And as we were just saying, you know, you never really know, or you never really understood how your role was connected to the bigger picture in terms of a sale. So you don't really have that kind of drive and passion to put yourself out there and to say, well, this is the thing that you need. So how are you now going to do that for yourself? You know, so kind of correcting those things, kind of saying, and having a clear sense of what you're actually trying to sell. That's another big thing, again, coming back to the generalist. So you may have a lot of skill, but what are you actually selling? What I gave you money, what are you actually giving to me? So people might say, well, I can do this, I could do that, I could do the other. Okay, you can do all those things, but what am I going to get? Because I don't need all those things. So I do start with the foundation piece to give people some level of clarity and helping them understand themselves as a brand archetype. You know, where do they identify based on the things that they're actually trying to do? You know, and once they have a sense of clarity on that level, and they have a sense, okay, well, this is who I am. So I'm clear about who I am, and I'm clear about how I can serve. I'm clear about who I can actually help and where I will actually have the most impact. That is when we then move into things like the content, and we move into things. So I have a challenge within the program where I tell people they do a video challenge for 7 days, and I give them outline everything they're supposed to say. And for the ones who did it, like I had a group in June, and when they did it, one of them was like, when I look back on it now, I don't actually know what I was so afraid of. I am not quite sure why I didn't do this before, or somebody said like they didn't really realize how many people they had in their corner supporting them. All they had to do was actually say, well, this is who I am, and this is what I can offer. And then people started to say, I know because you helped me do this. I know because you helped me do that in the past. But because a lot of people actually already doing the thing that they want to do, but because they don't consider it something of value, because they just kind of do it anyway, they do it every day, they don't think of it as something that they should probably even be getting paid for. So I try to shift that mindset to make them see, yes, you can in fact get paid for this. Yes, you can get value from it. Yes, you can tell people, well, in order to access me on that level, you have to pay. That is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So once they do the confidence piece, then the content piece, and inside of that we build in, and then the communication is the last piece. So moving from that person who is just like likely engaged on LinkedIn, who just likes, to that person who comments, to that person who DMs, to that person who networks, to that person who actually pitches and knows how to do that. So you're not sending these kind of gross, grimy pitches and DMs where you try to get people to sign up to whatever. You know, you learn about building genuine relationships and how you can actually literally set your entire LinkedIn or whatever on fire with the amount of people who will be reaching out to you, just because you know how to communicate better and because you know how to genuinely connect with people. And so the process is confidence, as I said, content, communication, and then we tie all those together to how do we get those people off of social media and looking at something that we have. And yeah, that's my process essentially. But a lot of the time is spent in the first phase, shifting those beliefs, shifting those mindsets, teaching people that yes, you can actually get paid for these things and you can be known for this because it's what you bring to the table, is your value. Yeah.
Right. And you know, it's funny because when you mentioned the first piece about mindset and confidence, until you actually said it, it didn't really click to me as an important part of someone starting out building a personal brand. Because when you said it, I'm like, yeah, that's how it was for me on both fronts. From the front of where you, well, I mean, if you're extroverted, fine. I mean, it's probably easier for you to put yourself out there and say who you are, what you do. But if you're introverted like me, it's a mental challenge to kind of get over that hurdle of, boy, you know, I have to put myself out there, I have to talk about myself. I wonder what people are going to say. What are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm an imposter? And a lot of people struggle with the same things as well. And also on the other side, where I'm someone who, because I'm so good at critical thinking, strategy development, reverse engineering processes and results comes natural for me. But I used to think that this is just something that anybody could do. Like, it's not really a big deal. You can't really pay somebody to develop a strategy. Because for me, that's something that should be natural for anybody. And it wasn't until until I started really positioning myself back in 2016 with this whole content marketing thing, that it really started to click to me. I mean, and I'm someone who's been in the marketing industry for 13 years. And I'm talking about, it wasn't until 4 years ago that it really clicked to me that strategy is something that people will actually pay for. So it's a very interesting point that you made, and I'm glad that at least you provide that aspect of your service of helping them get over that barrier as a first step. Before we even start talking about who you serve, your audience, your content, what you offer, is just getting over that mental barrier of, I am deserving of this. I can do this. I have value that I can offer to the marketplace.
Yeah, because I mean, when you talk about personal branding, because I talk about, positioning yourself as an authority, and authority isn't afraid to say who they are and what they can offer. Somebody who knows and is clear about what their value is and what they bring to the table isn't afraid of saying, yeah, this is me and I can offer you this and this is the price, Somebody who sits in a seat of authority is very clear about that and they're unafraid to say that. So strategic thinking, critical thinking, yes. Something as simple as, even like, I develop a script to DM people on LinkedIn, and there are people who will pay for that because they don't know how to start a conversation. They don't know where to start, how not to sound weird, because a lot of people have reservations about sounding weird in a DM. People might screenshot them. A lot of people have a lot of reservations about that. And simple communication, people will, because I realize that too, and it's really, really great that you said that you didn't realize people would pay for something like that. People pay to learn how to speak. That's what they do. Even if for some people it comes natural. I could go onto a stage and speak, and I can DM somebody with no problem, But for some people, that's like a big problem, and they don't know how to do it. And anything to improve the human condition, there's opportunity to sell your skill in that regard. So yes, definitely, it's a huge shift in mindset that people have to understand that people will pay for that. Yes, they will. They certainly will pay for it, for sure.
Yes, they will. All right. So as you mentioned, talking about authority, and I'll close out with this. How can businesses build, or should I say, use social media and content to build their reputation online? Because, I mean, so far we've been talking about the individual, but what about like business in terms of corporate branding?
Well, when it comes to corporate branding, I definitely say that, before we even get to content, I think what's important is that corporate entities need to understand that their culture affects their content, right? And so branding in and of itself, the content is just a very small piece of it. And the best way to leverage content is to get your employees to feel so good about where they work that they will post and you don't even have to prompt them. Right. And that's a huge one. Now, there are other ways, of course, you could use content, use freebies to engage people, get them onto your mailing list. You could offer really interesting one-on-one types of communication. So you may have a podcast coming out of the company, or you may have a web show coming out of the company. That really does help. But you definitely want to be able to build that personality into the brand and understand that content heavily is driven by company culture.
All right, awesome. So, Jamila, once again, I just want to thank you for taking time to be on. So before we actually go, one of the things I always do with every guest is give them a chance to promote something, or their business, whatever it is they want to use as a free plug here to get people and, help them make some money or build an audience or whatever it is that they choose to do with this time. So I'll just give you the stage now to go ahead and do that.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. Well, listeners and folks, I definitely want to take this time to want to say thanks to Winston for having me on, and two, to let you all know about the Brand Print Summit. Of course, we've been talking personal branding all along on this episode. So the Brand Print Summit is an upcoming free summit that I'm actually hosting. And of course, Winston is one of the speakers. He will be there. And so this summit actually brings together 36 people from 36 experts actually from 7 different countries, and they will be sharing with you how you can actually build a personal brand. So what I've done is that I've broken down different aspects of personal branding into very granular pieces. So you'll have an opportunity to learn about mindset and confidence. You'll have an opportunity to learn about content and how it works. You'll have an opportunity to learn how to sell yourself and pitch yourself, and as well how to set up your business for success. So you can visit www.brandprintsummit.com to register and grab your free ticket. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It's the best free summit around right now. Okay.
Awesome. All right, guys. And what I'll do, Jamila, as well, I'll put the link. You can send me the link for them to register. And I'll include it in the actual post for this podcast.
I will do that.
So if people wanted to connect with you to continue this conversation, where can they find you?
Guys, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jamila Bannister. You can find me on Instagram at JB Branding, and Facebook, J Bannister Branding. And I'm actually redoing my website right now, but if you guys check me out on the Brand Print Summit, sign up there, you guys will join my mailing list. And yeah, but connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm there the most. We can always talk there.
All right, awesome. Jamila, thanks again for being on. Such a pleasure having you on. So many nuggets. A lot of things that I even learned in terms of, how to approach building a personal brand as well.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care and all the best.
All right, you too. Take care. Bye, everyone.